Declan, good morning.
Morning.
Thanks very much for agreeing to do this with us. I'm just got to get a wee chat, let everybody know. I'd imagine there'll be a lot of people in West Lothian that will have heard of Smile Counselling now, because of kind of how big you guys are in the community now. But for anyone that doesn't know, just to kind of raise a wee bit of awareness ahead of the charity ball in August. So when did you start Smile Counselling, and what was your kind of reasons behind starting
it? I set Smile Counselling up in 2015. Probably like most charities or social enterprises, they're born out of seeing a gap and probably a bit of frustration. You know, where you see there's something that needs to change and something that needs to happen, that is being worked on, but you can see maybe there's an opportunity to kind of cut through some of the red tape with some things as well. So my experience was when I moved to Scotland, I worked for one of the big charities and worked in Bathgate for them, coordinating an employability project with young people. And then I worked for the local authority in the Working with Young People team. So my experience in the Working with Young People team was my job was to work with the hardest to reach young people, is what they were kind of described as, which I'm not overly keen in that term. I feel like everybody's reachable within that sense, but it's just how we do it. But my experience with those young people specifically who were all 16 plus was that a lot of them were experiencing mental health challenges and concerns, among other things, you know, so homelessness, addiction, antisocial behaviour. But every single person had a mental health issue or concern that they were trying to work through, but they just couldn't get the service. So they were either on waiting lists for long periods of time, or they didn't have the right workers to support them. So my idea was that I was a qualified therapist anyway. So I thought, well, if I volunteer, you know, an evening or a weekend, if I can support a few, that was the goal. You know, I really just wanted to support one person, and if I could, and if it made a difference, then great. And it kind of just grew organically from there. You know.
So what is it? Is that the kind of age group that you still kind of focus on then? Is kind of younger people?
So initially it was actually 16 to 24 was the age range, and then we had done some work in schools through the YPI project, the Young Youth Philanthropy Initiative, and that was kind of S3s and S4s. And so the feedback that we were getting was, look, it's a great service, we really like the sound of it and stuff, but it's, what about us? You know, and kind of naively, I suppose, I thought, right, well, they're in schools and there'll be enough support there through kind of statutory services. And it didn't seem to be the message that we were getting. So probably within a year, which is fairly unheard of, we chose to change our constitution.
Right.
So we contacted Oscar, who's the charitable kind of governing body, and explained that, look, we've had feedback from multiple young people under the age of 16 saying there is a need for a service for them. So could we change our age range down to 11 to support those transitioning from primary 7 into high school? And when we made that change, it was just referrals skyrocketed, really. Wow. So now we support young people 11 to 26. So it's 11 to 24 or 26 if you're care experienced. And we work with everybody across the board, and we're in multiple schools in West Lothian now as well. So thankfully we've supported almost 1,500 children and young people in West Lothian now.
See, I find it incredible, maybe naively, from my point of view, that there's people as young as 11 going to get counselling. You know, like, do you get many people around that age then, as young as that, coming to see you?
We do, I mean, we've got high numbers in that age range, and I suppose that's why we're having that discussion today, is because part of that is that the referrals for the under 16s ages have absolutely kind of astronomically grown now. So we've unfortunately had to turn away quite a number of children, really. You know, they're not actually young people in the sense they're children kind of ages 11 to 15, because we just don't have the resource at the minute, you know, and we're trying to build that. But we see a lot of children aged 11 to 15 who come into our core service, which is in our own premises in Livingston, or in schools. So, you know, a lot of the work we do in schools is with those age ranges as well. And all our counsellors are full, you know, with waiting lists.
That's incredible. And how do you feel? Like, I'm just thinking how I was when I was kind of, a teenager, awkward as anything. Like trying to even speak to my mum and dad was a task. So how do you feel? Like, is it more difficult to get someone at that age to open up to you? Would someone maybe in their 20s or how does that usually go when you first meet them? Is it quite hard to crack sort of thing?
I think probably each individual is unique,
Mm-hmm.
but I think what's good about young people now is they have a greater understanding of mental health, probably than we did, and that naivety of you just have to get on with it, and especially for young men as well, they don't talk about their emotions or feelings, and what we're seeing now statistically is we have probably 2/3 female and 1/3 male, which is increasing, that are coming for support. But generally, young people are great to work with because they're quite honest and sometimes too honest. But they're honest in what they're coming with. They haven't been clouded by a lot of the stuff that we've learned as adults growing up to, try and navigate around a scenario that they're uncomfortable with. They're quite open in the sense that if you explain the confidentiality and where it exists in the counselling relationship, it's about building trust. And counselling's a relationship. It's like any relationship between two people. You have to build it on trust, and it has to be a give and take as well. So it's about getting the client to understand that, look, this isn't a one-way street, and I don't want you to just divulge all your innermost secrets to me, who's a stranger, straight away. I'm here to earn your trust, and this is what we'll do to work on that.
Aye, absolutely amazing. And then in terms of the sort of obviously the fundraising that we're going to be doing for the and the charity ball at the end of August, what would that go to for Smile Counselling?
For us, it would certainly go towards an under-16s counsellor. That's our drive at the minute, and what we're fundraising for in anything that we're doing. So, we have a couple of under-16s counsellors that that are fantastic, but they're part-time and they're on certain days. We have one specialist neurodiverse therapist as well that works with children, specifically children who have neurodiversity, which is fantastic. But that funding's up this year as well. Right. So we're going to start to lose some of the resource that we have. So rather than, I suppose, wait till we're at the last day, we really want to drive this as much as we can and build on our resources as well to look at where we can get other funding streams. But with the charity ball, I think it'll be twofold. It'll be allowing whatever amazing fundraising that's done through that ball to go towards that specific role for the next year, but also to raise awareness around the work and the need for young people's mental health services and for the support for the adults who support them. Because what we see is that so many parents come in here and they can see the change when their child comes out, and there's almost a sense of guilt with parents of why could I not do that and why could they not speak to me about it. And I suppose it's maybe training and getting adults and parents and grandparents and the community as a whole to understand how they can support young people as well, that we might not always have an open book where we can see everybody, no service does. So how are we able to not just listen to young people, but to hear them and hear what they really need from us rather than automatically reacting to things all the time,
Aye, 100%. And I suppose it's like I suppose with a lot of this stuff, it's the things that people don't want to talk about, the kind of horrible stuff, especially when you're talking about kind of young kids and stuff. And people probably have been burying their head in the sand a wee bit, but I suppose it's kind of normalising to use a service like this when it's needed, rather than kind of waiting too long as well. Yeah. What if there's a parent or even someone young that's kind of watching that's thinking about maybe going to counselling? What does that look like if someone approaches you guys? Like, what does the kind of process look like when they come to see you or when they kind of pick up the phone, sort of thing?
All right, I think the most important thing that we say to anybody that refers themselves, or if a parent specifically refers, because parents, the biggest hearts in the world, and as a parent, and you'll know this as well, you would do anything for your child, and you just want to protect them. And when you feel like you can't, there's a sense of kind of loss and absence and that, and desperation. We've had so many parents that cry down the phone to us in desperation. And what we would say is that include the child or young person in the discussion and in the conversation about being referred for counselling. Don't just refer them with the assumption that they will go. I'll always say to parents and other adults, how would you like it if I came into your work and said, right, you're going for therapy in an hour, let's go. I mean, it takes time to prepare, to get your kind of resilience built up, to understand that I'm going to have to discuss a lot of the stuff that I've never discussed before.
Yeah.
So, young people are resilient. They're amazing, and if we include them in discussions, we're more likely to get them to come along with us rather than, the world that we know, parents and grandparents and carers, it's just instinct to care for kids. And what they'll do is they'll take them to the doctors, they'll speak for them, they'll take them to the dentist, they'll speak for them. And the young person doesn't really find a voice in anything. And this is sometimes the first place where they have they find the voice to be heard, and also that it comes with non-judgment, and no matter what they say, that it's completely confidential as long as they're not an immediate risk to themselves or someone else. And we explain that to parents as well. I think sometimes parents would love to hear what their child says in the room, or but it's that relationship and important and trusting that they're making the right decisions, and we're supporting them professionally to get to a part in their journey where they will be safe and hopefully move on and not have to come for therapy again.
No, it's absolutely amazing. I've said this to you before. I absolutely love the work you guys do. I've kind of kept an eye on since I kind of first heard about you, probably a couple of years ago now, and I'm such a big fan of the work you do. We came in here about maybe a month or two ago, and we were just so touched by the service, and we were really shocked when we heard about how young people were that were coming to see you guys. As I say, we were totally like, we walked away from here like, wow, like you just don't think that that young kids need this, but obviously there is such a need for it. And I was saying as well, I feel like the whole mental health issue, which is the whole reason behind why we're doing the fundraiser and everything like that, is if you go back even like 10 years or whatever, it was such a stigma, and it still is, but it needs to be spoke about so much more. There's still a lot of work to do, and I think anyway, to make these kind of nice conversations, as I say, that wee bit more kind of normal. And if you do need counselling, or you do need support with something, to just no overthink it too much and just go and do it, just like you would if there's anything else wrong, with you physically.
Aye, that's exactly it. That I think that's the difficulty. It's that hidden harm that people don't see. If you a lot of therapists will use that analogy. If you break your leg, you go to A&E, you go for treatment, you get a plaster Paris on it and a stookie. It takes time then for recovery, and you're given physio, and we respect that time. We respect that, I'm going to have to be on crutches. Therapy is a crutch. We don't need it all the time, but there will come a time when we get to take the stookie off and we don't need the crutch anymore. But in this moment in time, whenever you're feeling that pain and you're suffering, then this is the crutch that you might need, and that's okay. But it's getting people to understand that therapy isn't something that is negative or bad. It's something that we all need. If you have emotions, you need therapy. And it's not about going to therapy. Most people will turn to therapy whenever they're in crisis, but we're seeing more and more people now, especially adults, and that are kind of past a certain stage in their life, come to therapy to understand themselves a wee bit more. So it's not that they're in a immediate crisis. They're kind of saying, well, I want to understand me and my childhood, and therapy is a process. So if you can come when you're well and you use it as part of just like you would at the dentist, you go for a checkup, and you go in, you make sure everything's okay. If you need any kind of support with anything, then you get that, and then you move on. I've had so many clients that kind of come back for check-ins now. If they'll finish with me, they'll come back, and they'll come back 6 months later, a year later, 3 years later, and for one session, and say, look, I just wanted to check in, keep you up to speed. Can I bounce this off for a session, and that's all they need. And that's amazing.
100%. So what's the kind of future plans then for Smile Counselling? Where do you kind of go for here? Obviously you grew enormously. You're saying is there like kind of 30 people in the kind of organisation now? Is that right?
Aye. So including our volunteers and trustees, we have 30 people. They're amazing people. You know,
Mm.
S.M.I.L.E wouldn't work without these people, and they really are instrumental. They're a spoke in the wheel that makes it all go round. And so that I think for us that the next step is, like I was saying about the community, we want to focus on the community and continue to provide therapy and continue to do it in schools and as much as we can in our own building. But there's also an element where we want to educate. You know, we want to educate people, like you've said, you know, the taboo of mental health and certainly around suicide as well, and the risks around suicide and intervention. So we've increased a lot of our assist courses that we're delivering as well. And we've been funded for them through the third sector interface in East Lothian and West Lothian. So there's spaces there if people are interested. That they can do a suicide intervention course. Brilliant. And we want to educate the community around mental health, to take that taboo kind of conversation out of it so that we can hopefully, I mean, my ideal would be that families are comfortable sitting around the table and saying, you know, how was your day today? Well, I've done an assist course. I've done that as well. What did you think of it? And, you know, and they talk about mental health just quite, you know, naturally, and it opens it up so that people aren't, you know, taboo and they lock it down. That, you know, we encourage not just young people, but sometimes adults are the jar. Young people are there, you know, they're happy talking about mental health. It's an open forum for them. And the difficult part is adults now. You know, it's getting them to say it's all right to talk to your young people. You won't plant a seed. You know, there's always that worry. You know, I hear that a lot. You know, but if I say it, well, they might go and do it. You know, if it's talking about self-harm or suicide, or if someone's going to do something, they've already thought about it. You know, we are not that powerful as human beings that we can initiate a thought process and a behaviour. You know, if someone's going to do it, but if you can talk to them about it and find another avenue or another resource or tool that they can use alternative to the one that might be damaging to them, and that's maybe where they need to be. So we need to support the community to be more knowledgeable and confident. You know, a confident community and a suicide safer community to talk about these things. You know, suicide is still a high risk in Scotland, and I think the last numbers from 2021 were 753 suicides and 30 in West Lothian. Incredible. But that's the numbers that we know of. So if we really look at the stats for what isn't known, so stuff like car crashes that may have been suicides that aren't counted as suicides, or, you know, misadventure with drugs, or, you know, it can be anywhere between 5 and 25% over the 753. So when we look at those numbers, I mean, there's more suicides in Scotland than there are car accidents, death by car accidents. Wow. You know, so that's a very prevalent issue, and it's something that, you know, we need to work on in West Lothian about creating a much better and suicide safer community for our young people. We've lost too many young lives in West Lothian already to suicide. So the more we can educate ourselves and build and educate suicide first aiders in West Lothian, that's where we want to be.
Aye, 100%, and it's like that's obviously the reason why we're doing this. But for obviously to raise as much money as possible. But for me, I've seen so many people have been affected by suicide myself. My dad took his own life when I was 18, and obviously it's a subject that's really, really close to my heart. But since then, and that was a huge taboo at the time, and that, you know, that was 9 years ago now, so, you know, not talking a long time ago. And you know, as I say, it's definitely the subject of mental health has been spoke about a lot more now these days. But I always feel that when a young person sadly does take their life, obviously there's a huge, you know, amount of focus on it, but I feel like that kind of dwindles away. It's really sad that, you know, it dwindles away and no one talks about it again. And then unfortunately we lose another young life, or it doesn't even need to be a young person, but then it's really spoke about again, you know, and then again it sort of just kind of disappears, and people don't like to talk about it. It's just one of those kind of subjects that isn't nice to talk about. But if there was like those statistics are crazy. If you think if there was anything else, you know, a disease or anything like that was killing those amount of people every year, it would be spoke about all the time. Absolutely.
Do you know, and I think that's the part where we need to get better at, you know, and hopefully we see government and stuff making strategies, and there are strategies out there, and, you know, there's a West Lothian suicide prevention strategy group as well that I'm a member of, and we're looking and discussing about what we can do in the future around prevention intervention, but, you know, postvention as well. You know, we need to stop being reactive. You know, like you said, we react, there's an outcry, and then sadly, people move on with their lives, and things diminish, and but the turmoil and the grief that exists for the family and those that have been affected is still very, very real. So how do we get better at, we cannot stop everybody. People will make their choices, and it's a very difficult choice that people will make, and it's the last choice they will make. And what we've learned from it's very difficult to get the statistics on this, but because you can't speak to people after they're gone. But there was one instance, I'm maybe going off script here. But
No, you're fine. No.
There was one instance in San Francisco, so the Golden Gate Bridge. So there was a program that was videoed, and there was ethical kind of quandaries around that. So they put cameras along the bridge to video suicides over a period of a month. It didn't stop them; it just videoed them. But there was one guy who survived. And they were able to speak to this person after, and after they took the video and showed him, and his words were, "As soon as my fingertips left the bridge, I automatically didn't want to do it."
Wow.
And I suppose the question is, how many people sadly have felt that, but weren't able to be in a position to survive at the end of it?
Yeah.
So it's, how do we educate people around suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention, to say that there are other avenues, and what can we do to support those people who are feeling that way. There's amazing resources in other counties that have safe houses for people who feel at risk. So rather than going to, for example, St John's or being put into Ward 17, they go to a safe house, and then that way they go there, they have a room. There's people who are trained in supporting people who are at suicide and at risk of suicide. And they can stay for the night, or they can stay for a few nights, feel safe, stabilise, and then get the support through that. So those kind of things would be amazing in West Lothian, and I hope we can get there with that.
100%. And we've obviously spoke to Jamie's Sanctuary, with Debbie Ann last week, and the work that they're trying to do as well to catch people when sadly there's a lot of young people, kind of early 20s or teenagers that are kind of out on a Saturday night, and they maybe have got problems of maybe with addiction or that, and they're making decisions when they're not in the right frame of mind as well. So it's like those guys are doing amazing work there to try and kind of catch people in that, that, like you're saying, that totally might regret that. It's just the kind of frame of mind that they're in at the time, which is so sad. And we were speaking to you about us potentially going on to one of the courses as well, because when I started as an estate agent, in my mind I had this kind of picture that everyone just kind of sold their house to move on to a nicer dream home. And it's just so far from the reality. It's crazy. I mean, the amount of really, really sad kind of divorces, deaths that we deal with, and people with mental health issues and everything like that. It's just kind of stuff that people don't see. It seems really glamorous being an estate agent and selling lovely houses, but the reality that can be really different at times. And we can have, probably wrongly, we kind of have the kind of estate agent head on and go, you can't really have the conversations with people, but they're just people, and so are we.
That's it. And I think when we boil it down to that level, and you're talking about that as, you're probably in a perfect position to hear these stories and possibly prevent a life, from being taken if they are in crisis, and being able to ask the question. And sometimes that's all it is. It's just asking the question. It sounds like when people talk like this, they're thinking about suicide. Are you thinking about suicide? If someone says no, they're not going to say, no, I wish you never asked me. They're going to say, no, but thanks for asking. I am struggling, but I'm not there. The other thing is, someone might say yes. And then what do you do after that? And that's where the assist training comes in. We talk about, after you hear the yes, how do we create a safety plan, and what do we do to support them? And your company's probably in a good position, because you're all over the county, selling, lovely houses, and, but difficult circumstances. We only see the surface level stuff for anything. It's the Insta life, isn't it? It's what you see isn't always what you get. So, and that's where we struggle with young people, is the social media platforms that create an ulterior life that doesn't really exist for any, and we want to kind of support them to understand that this is reality as well, and not, the digital and social side.
100%. Declan, thanks very much for doing this. It's been great, and hopefully, you know, if anyone's kind of watching and is considering either going to counselling or sending, you know, their kids, speaking to them about it as well. Hopefully that kind of breaks that, you know, kind of unknown kind of fear for them. And as I've said before, I'll keep kind of blowing your trumpet, because it's an absolutely amazing charity that we're really happy to support. So looking forward to obviously the charity ball and anything else that we can help you with moving forward.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, and thanks for all your support as well.
You're welcome.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Thank you.